Hello everyone, Moobies here, and welcome back to the Trial of the Grand Crusader Boss Guide series. In this video, we'll be going over the final boss, the Nerubian Overlord, Heroic Anub'arak. If you're looking for a normal mode guide, please fast forward to the end of this video for normal mode tips and changes. Anub'arak is a 3-phase fight with 8 abilities, 2 adds, and a 10-minute enrage timer. In Phase 1, Anub'arak will cast Freezing Slash, which inflicts 25% frost strike damage to an enemy and freezes it in a block of ice for 3 seconds. This is also cast in Phase 3. Penetrating Cold, which puts a debuff on 5 random raid members, dealing 6,000 frost damage every 3 seconds for 15 seconds. Once it expires, he will immediately choose another 5 raid members. This is also cast in Phase 3. Submerge. Every 90 seconds, Anub'arak will submerge underground and begin Phase 2. This is not cast in Phase 3. And finally, Summon Nerubian Burrower. Every 45 seconds, Anub'arak will spawn 4 Nerubian Burrowers. This is cast in Phase 3. We'll go over them in a minute. Phase 2, Anub'arak will debuff a random raid member with Pursued by Anub'arak, and he will send pursuing spikes after them which speed up over time. If he reaches his target, he will cast Impale, dealing massive damage to anyone within 6 yards and knocking them high up into the air. This cannot go through permafrost. He also spawns Swarm Scarabs during this phase. After reaching 30% health, Anub'arak will enter Phase 3, where he will gain 1 new ability, Leeching Swarm. Leeching 30% of each raid member's current HP, not maximum, every 1 second, and healing Anub'arak for a large amount based on the amount of damage dealt. A minimum of 250 HP will be leeched. All abilities from Phase 1 will remain except for Submerge. Now, let's talk about the adds. Nerubian Burrowers have 3 abilities. Submerge. The burrower attempts to burrow underground and heal to full. It's uninterruptible. Will fail if it's on permafrost. Expose Weakness. Increases physical damage taken by 25%, stacks up to 9. And Shadow Strike. It's an 8-second cast and attempts to step through the shadows and strike a target for 40,000 shadow damage. It's interruptible and cast on a set timer. They also have a short-range aura called Spider Frenzy that will buff the other burrowers if within 12 yards of each other. During Phase 2, you'll deal with the Swarm Scarabs. While these have low HP, they have 1 ability that can be very dangerous, Acid-Drenched Mandibles. Every melee attack they do will stack this debuff on a target, dealing nature damage every 3 seconds for 1 minute. It stacks up to 99. Now, let's talk strategy. This fight is the hardest fight in the raid, and also the most fun, in my opinion. You'll want to bring 3 tanks, 5 healers, and a mix of ranged and melee DPS. There was talk about using 2 tanks and having that second tank use a block set to mitigate the damage from all 4 burrowers. When testing, this did not function as anticipated, so using 3 tanks is the recommended strategy. When you engage Anub'arak, 6 frost orbs will spawn in the air around the room. 2 of these must be pulled down immediately to both sides of the boss and killed for permafrost. He'll spawn 4 Nerubian Burrowers, which must be tanked in sets of 2 on each of the ice patches to the left and right side of the boss. The Burrowers must be killed before the next set spawn, so keep them close, but not close enough to each other so that they get their Spider Frenzy buff. You'll also be dealing with heavy raid and tank damage throughout this phase. Healers must conserve mana for Phase 3. Tanks must be ready for the 3-second stun that will happen throughout this phase. At about 10 seconds before Submerge, the main tank will pull Anub'arak away from the group, and the main raid group will move backwards so range can still AoE the burrowers. Once he submerges and picks a target, that target will run to the back of the room while the rest of the raid cleans up the remaining burrowers from Phase 1. The remaining frost orbs will be brought down in Phase 2, and you'll want to plan for this to be his only submerge for the fight. Hand of Protection is a great tool for Phase 2. The raid member targeted by Anub'arak should stand near one of the new permafrosts and ask for a hand of protection. They will stand in the spikes for 8 seconds, then run across the permafrost, stunning Anub'arak and causing him to choose a new target. This will happen 3 to 4 times. Ensure that your healers are not getting hit by scarabs, tranquilizing shot and shiv to ensure that any enraged scarabs can be taunted, and all DPS are killing as many as they can. After 60 seconds, a noob will emerge from wherever the spikes are currently, and phase 1 will begin again. The biggest cause of wipes on this phase will be hitting one of the first 2 permafrosts during phase 2. If one of these get hit, you will not have a place to tank the burrowers when they spawn after the submerge ends. You will have to try and find a way to reposition the boss and make sure this works, otherwise it will cause a wipe. Once Anub'arak hits 30%, he will begin casting Leeching Swarm, starting to heal himself and deal massive damage to the raid. He will retain all of his abilities from phase 1, including spawning new burrowers, which will still do Shadow Strike and must be tanked on permafrost. This is where you use Bloodlust or Heroism, and it becomes a game of keeping the raid alive, but keeping their health very low. This portion of the fight will last for approximately 2 minutes. The goal is to ensure you have specific healers assigned for penetrating cold targets. We recommend using the Foji Weak Aura, which specifically assigns numbers to each target. This will allow you to assign your 3 additional healers to the 5 penetrating cold targets. The raid should not be healed. Vampiric Embrace, Healing Stream Totem, and Judgment of Light will be sufficient enough to keep up your entire raid. Paladins should be focused solely on the tanks. In addition, having each raid member armed with a Frost Protection Potion is extremely helpful here. If they are to get Penetrating Cold, using that potion instead of their DPS potion will dramatically increase survivability in the event a healer can't get a cast off on you before the first tick of Penetrating Cold. This is also a fantastic time to use your health stones if you get Penetrating Cold. Using it fast before the first tick will give the healers time to get a cast off on you so you don't get one-shot. Penetrating Cold can also be ice blocked off, can be removed with Bubble and other abilities, so those can and should be used in Phase 3 to assist with the healing burden. Getting through Phase 3 is a war of attrition. You want to make sure you're trying to keep the raid alive and don't lose people as much as possible. Keeping the tanks up is also very difficult. They will be taking heavy damage because they will also be getting hit by Leeching Swarm, 30% of their HP every second. Once you've been able to successfully navigate through Phase 3, you'll definitely have a kill. Now, let's go over some tips. Tank tips. Rotate your cooldowns in Phase 1. They'll all be back up after Phase 2. Save them all for 30% and rotate them after that. For the main tank, make sure you keep an eye on the Submerge timer. It's easy to get lost with the comms. If you're the ad tank, make sure that your ads are close enough to get cleaved. It's important to get enough damage in Phase 1 so that you only get one Submerge phase. Don't make people have to single target your ads. DPS tips. Cleave the heck out of the boss and ensure the burrowers die before the next set spawn. Do not get killed by the spikes in Phase 2. They still deal damage to anyone that walks over them. Kill the scarabs in Phase 2 to help healers. Pump hard in Phase 3, but keep your control. Healer tips. This fight is very healing intensive. Set up penetrating cold assignments and be careful of the scarabs in Phase 2. Keep the raid low, but healthy enough to survive in Phase 3, meaning don't heal them. Learning your control is important. Now, let's talk about the normal mode changes. On normal mode, only 2 Nerubian burrowers will spawn, and they will not spawn in Phase 3. They also do not cast Shadow Strike. Frost Orbs will respawn so you can get more permafrost. And finally, Leeching Swarm now only does 10% of current HP, and Anub'arak's damage and health is reduced overall. You can go down to 2 tanks if you feel that's necessary and tank the burrowers on top of each other on 1 permafrost. Overall, the strategy remains the same. You can adjust some parts of it to fit your raid if needed. If you can keep your raid alive and position correctly, you'll defeat the Nerubian King, and congratulations! You've completed the trial of the Grand Crusader! Thank you so much for watching my Trial of the Grand Crusader Boss Guide series. As always, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make more videos. I'll see you next time!